All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PM Therapy Podcast. My name is Mukhtar, and I am joined by Benjamin. Benjamin, by the way, what do you go with? Do you go with Ben or Benjamin?
I can go by Ben. I usually introduce myself as Benjamin because sometimes if you say Ben, people get confused and like, is it Ken? Is it Dan? One syllable, too short. Introduce myself as Benjamin, but totally cool with being called Ben.
All right, awesome. So Benjamin. All right, so
All good.
I'm gonna hand it over to you now to just introduce yourself for those people that don't know who you are. Can you?
Absolutely. So my name is Ben Chan. I'm a project leadership success coach, really helping to go and transform project managers so that they're not stressed, they can overcome their challenges and really build up their power skills to develop their career and advance forward. And as a side note of other things that I do, I'm also a speaker, workshop facilitator. I love comic books, and on the side, sometimes I do a little bit of stand-up comedy as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Nice. Yeah, Ben has a lot of talents, and yeah, maybe we can see his stand up talents on this show today. No, I'm teasing. No pressure.
We'll see. We'll see.
Nice. All right. So today we're going to be doing something a bit different. So what we're going to do is that we're going to look at some headlines in the news affecting PMs, and then we're going to just break them down. Maybe comment, give our opinions, etc. All right. So if you've seen the invitation from today, you should have seen like some of the topics that we're going to talk about. Now, we will do our best to cover all those topics, but we might not get the time to do that, just depending on how the conversation goes. The one thing that I would say is please feel free to use the chat, chime in, leave your comments, leave your questions, and we'll try to weave those in as we go along. All right. So the first topic is flattening of organizations. So many of you have seen in the news, like with Microsoft last week, a lot of layoffs are happening. So I think Microsoft laid off or is going to lay off about 6,000 people. And Meta is having its year of efficiency. Well, I think it's been going on for a couple of years now, but years of efficiency. And many other companies like Intel are really flattening the company, the organization. So basically what that means is that they're removing layers of management in between, right? So I wanted to talk about that, Ben. So what are your thoughts on that, and what do you think that means for PMs?
Well, I think it really reminds me of that Office Space movie, right? Where they're trying to interview one of the guys, right? Bob and Bob, and asking him, well, what do you exactly do here? Right. And I'm the guy that tells people what they need to know. And, I'm a people person. Right. And I think a lot of where the sentiment comes from an organizational perspective is how are we going to be able to go and cut costs and be able to go and streamline a lot of our approvals or processes and things like that. Right. And from a cost perspective, that will work because you're taking people out of the equation. That automatically means you're going to be getting money back. But I think the other piece that sometimes gets left to the wayside and is usually an aftermath of all of these cuts is how does that impact the actual flow of business, right? When you have people reporting into someone, it's because they can go and manage them, right? Where you're maybe managing a team of 8 people, but as you cut out middle management, that exponentially grows for that person that is above them. So suddenly that person who, let's say, is a director or whatnot, they are maybe used to managing, let's say, 5 managers. But all of those people all of a sudden start flowing back into that director role. And suddenly he's having to go and directly manage 25 people. Right. And what we see from that is they may not be as focused because now rather than splitting my attention 5 ways, I have to split it 25 ways. Now, obviously the approval processes and things like that, they don't go through have as much, I'll say, vertical type of authority, but then are people making the right decisions if they have less attention spent on it? From a PM perspective, and kind of being, I guess, a little bit of that middle layer, is you hope to be able to go and condense a lot of that information, make it digestible for the higher ups to be able to make decisions and whatnot. And I think what sometimes gets lost is what is the cost or efficiency you have in those type of activities, right? And to an extent, and maybe this is a little bit cynical, is that a lot of these decisions are not in our control, right? As a PM inside of it, if they decide to go and cancel your project or decide, hey, maybe we don't need a project manager for it, there's probably not as much that you can go and do directly to be able to influence that position, other than I would say maybe two things, right? The first one is, what is the importance or value of the project to the organization? And also then, what is your value to as a PM to the organization, right? And that's where I think for you to be able to control that a little bit more is you have to build your brand internally. You don't necessarily have to be on LinkedIn, but you need to be able to go and build that with your executives and to the business, right? And it really does, I know, for all intents and purposes, it sucks, right? Yeah. Because as the middle layer, being able to go and help and bridge strategy to execution, their decisions are usually not going to lie with you.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a couple of interesting points, and so here's my thought on some of, like regarding decision making. I think that if we're not careful, this can actually have the reverse impact, right? Because this is supposed to speed up decision making, but what ends up happening is, like you mentioned, one person goes from managing 5 people to managing 25 people. They now become the bottleneck, and that could now even slow down decision making, right? And
absolutely.
I think that when you are the manager that's left behind, you have to be a super manager, right? Because now you need to make sure that you're not a bottleneck. You need to make sure that, on top of that, you're not just a manager, you're also a leader, right? Because my fear is that when you have like 25 people, you're managing 25 people, it's like you're making sure the assembly line is moving, as opposed to spending time to develop and to nurture like the next generation of leaders, right? I heard that one of the CEOs at the top companies has like 60 reports. Like, I don't know how you manage 60 reports, so these are like this is my take. I think if you're not careful, yes, you remove that middle layer, but does that really speed up decision making? And my own take is that also the reason for that structure is so that you can empower people below you and you can push down decision making, so that the only decisions that come up are decisions that are really high stake, right? If every decision is coming up to you, then that's not a very efficient organization structure, and I admit that, okay, that's a bloated organization, right? But if a lot of decision is being made, you empowered every level to make decisions, and only the few come up to you, then I don't know that removing that middle layer actually helps with speeding up decision making. Does that? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I would agree, because even the bottom layer, right, or the lower layer, not disparaging anyone, right, is they may not necessarily be completely equipped to be able to act more autonomously, right, or even to communicate to leadership on the critical things, the key messages, to be able to make decisions quickly. And so what happens is, let's say that person has 60 reports, right? For a full working day, if you're working every single minute, you got 8 minutes per person to go and figure out, do I have all the information? What do I need to go and do? How do I go and make that decision based off of what I have? And has it been communicated effectively to me to be able to do that, right? So there's just so many different factors on it. And then plus comes the additional stress of, are there other cuts that are going to be coming, right? Like, we can see in these organizations, it hasn't been one and done. It's always comes in a little bit of waves, and that flows into probably other things we're going to talk about a little bit later here.
No, that's going to be something that we're going to talk about. But it just reminds me of, I was with a company, and whenever they do a layoff like this, like it's major, and they're like, all right, this is it, you people that are left, you guys are the cream of the crop. You are the best. And then a quarter later, another wave. Oh no, this is the final. Like you guys are the best. Until it's like people now become cynical. Oh yes, we know we are. We know we are the cream of the crop. When are you gonna let me go so I can, like, because sometimes like that anxiety is quite tasking. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's going to be the next topic we're going to talk about. Anxiety. But what I wanted to one question I wanted to touch on, Ben, is does a flatter organization, is that better for PMs or not? Like, does more hierarchy or less hierarchy, which environment is better for PMs?
Like any good question, you're always going to get this answer of it depends. Right? A flatter organization can work if it has the right type of culture built into it, right? To be responsive, to have that attention, to make those decisions quickly, right? And if there's a lot of different people all, again, reporting into it, that person can become a bottleneck. So rather than the bottleneck becoming a vertical stream of I'm waiting for this person, then the person above them, and then the person above them. And that's why we have delegation of authority inside of organizations, right? To be able to authorize things and waiting for, let's say, 3 people to approve, you're just waiting for one person to take forever to approve. Right. So if you have a culture and a way to communicate the urgency of things and move things along quickly, and you have built that influence, it could be faster in either situation, right? But again, there's so much that depends on the person, the people, the culture that's built within to be able to do it. Because I would say any culture that is being impacted by these organizational changes, they will slow down because people won't know what they're doing. They haven't adapted to it. They don't know what to think around it, or maybe not even have the right mindset. So regardless of whether you're going to add layers of management in there or you're going to take them away, it will slow down.
Yeah. Okay. How about this perspective? How about, I'm not saying, I'm just trying to ensure that we have a robust conversation. So how about if I take the perspective that a flatter organization is actually better for PMs? Because what that means is that you're going to have these managers with lots of projects, and you can't expect an executive to be running around the entire org, coordinating, facilitating. So they actually need PMs to be able to help them drive things across the board, because they will not be able to do that.
And I think if there's a division of what type of authority you have, so let's say you've increased the amount of authority that a project manager has, then absolutely you can streamline a lot of those decisions more, because you're not seeking approvals necessarily. You have more power to make those calls. And again, if you're able to go and engage and be able to go and understand how to work within that flatter organization, and you're only bringing the really critical decisions up to them because now there's a different level of authority embedded within it, then by all means, yes, it can definitely move a lot faster.
I see. So what I'm hearing you say is that if the PM is empowered, then yes, that could be a good thing. But if the PM is not empowered, then you're saying that maybe not. But how about a situation whereby even if the PM is not empowered to make decisions, but even that facilitation across the board, like that could still be a lot of value, right? Because I think that it's going to be difficult for that executive to be able to like drive things across the board, ensure alignment and all of that. And maybe decisions are now put forth to the executive to decide on.
Yeah, I think if there is the attention to be able to say, if I'm the sponsor of your project, that I can go and make those decisions and have that streamlined. Absolutely. I think where my head goes to is if I look at the program side of it or the portfolio side of it, of sure, now it all goes to that person, but now I'm competing against everyone else to have that person or that flatter organization try and make decisions. And that's where there's a little bit of that conflict. And so it's a bit of a push and pull on both sides.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. By the way, if you have any, hey, Uche from Lagos, Nigeria. Hey, Greg from Jacksonville, Florida. Please feel free to introduce yourselves. And by the way, this is also a great way to meet other PMs as well, because as PMs, a lot of times we find ourselves in um, solo situations at work, right? And we don't always get time to connect with community. So this is also a good way to meet other people. So feel free to share, to put your LinkedIn profile and connect with people. As a reminder, also please feel free to ask questions, to chime in, so that we can weave your questions into the conversations. All right, Ben, anything else you want to say on the topic of flatter organizations before we switch gears?
I think if anything, if you're the PM, try and figure that out as fast as you can as to how that authority, how the decision making works, because that's usually going to be one of the larger barriers that happen. Of, I used to go to this person, now I need to go here, or this person can now make this level of decision.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. Yeah, because if you don't do that, then you will be crippled, as a PM, right? And
Yeah,
a lot of times when you're crippled, people don't blame the environment; they they blame you, the PM, right?
yeah,
Awesome. So now let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about layoff anxiety. So in this economy, with this, cuts that are happening, there's a lot of anxiety there when it comes to layoffs, right? So
Mhm.
the people that are left, they carry this weight. It's always there, constant in the backdrop.
Yeah.
So how do we lead? Like how can PMs lead in this setting when they're not sure about tomorrow? And how
Yeah.
can they also lead teams that are feeling this way, right? Because believe it or not, like, this is very present, even though it's not talked about in companies. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the anxiety is really because there's no control over it, right? You're not going to be making the decision as to who's leaving and whatnot. And so I think we can take maybe two perspectives on it, right? Is one is, how does it affect the PM? And let's say you're working in an organization, how does it affect you? And then also, how does it affect how you lead others, right? Because they're going to feel that anxiety as well. So I know this is probably easier said than done, but it's like, concentrate on the things that are adding value. Concentrate on the things that you are delivering, and continue to go and do that, right? If you've been doing that well, try and see how you can go and make it improved with your own personal work as a project manager, right? And from a team perspective, these emotions are going to be going through them, right? Of, what if I'm next? What's going to go on? What could happen into the future, right?
Yeah.
And if anything, my thought on it is, how do I help them build whatever path it is, whether they're staying here or going somewhere else? How do I help enhance them through the project work that I'm doing, right? And maybe it's also helping them promote their brand by saying, hey, look, let's keep doing great work, right? And let's make sure this great work is known, and that you can also quantify it, whether it's in your resume or with other executives that you're talking to as you go through this, right? So that they can feel like they're not just building it just to stay, but even if they do get let go or whatnot, they can put that forward and say, hey, these are the things that I've accomplished in my project. And so, I always try and see, how do I help elevate others or your presence, whatever it might be, in challenging times.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of my philosophy on just how do you build through that. And again, they still might feel a lot of that anxiety. And even sometimes it's like, hey, giving them a chance to be like, hey, you can go and take a breath, find some time to be able to do your own self-care to an extent. But if we're going to go through this, let's see how we be able to go and really emphasize our skills. What are the things that we have to do, either from a technical perspective or even from your power skill perspective?
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think one of the best antidotes to anxiety is action, right? And so I think a lot of times anxiety feeds itself when, you're not really, you're just sort of in your head, right? So I like that you're saying, okay, what can you do about it? What are the controllables? So I really like that. And I like the point of you mentioning building your brand, because your brand serves you both internally and externally as well. I know a lot of times, because I started building my brand, some years back, and it got to a point whereby my brand helped me with external opportunities, but it also even solidified my credibility in-house, right?
Absolutely.
So because now you find out you are more respected, even more well listened to when they see how you're treated on the outside, right? So I really love that point. I think another thing that that came up for me, and I use this formula sometimes when I find that something is really, really causing me anxiety, is I try to really just unpack it, right?
Mhm.
And this happens with maybe like interviews, or if I'm about to do public speaking. So there's this thing that I'm just going to type it in the chat, and hopefully you people. There's this acronym that I use. It's called SWOSIB. It's a terrible acronym, but I don't know if you have seen it there on LinkedIn, but it's basically SWOCIB. So S is specify, like specify what is really making me anxious, and you get into the who, the what, the when, like just really write it down, not do it in your head.
Right.
Then W is like worst case, like what's the worst that can happen? All right.
Mhm.
I'm anxious, I'm going to lay about like what's the worst that can happen? You can write it down. Then O is now like what are the odds? What are the chances that my worst case scenario would happen? All right. And then so there's C, how would I cope if the worst case scenario happens? So you're going to, now you're going into strategizing. Okay, if I were to be laid off, this is what I'm gonna do. This, I'm gonna warm my network. I'm gonna build my brand. I'm gonna, start reaching out to, my network. I don't know if I already said that. Then I is how can I influence things so that my worst case scenario doesn't happen, right? So this goes into your point of what you mentioned, building your brand and all of that. And then B is what's the best that can happen, right? So the best that can happen is that I won't be laid off, or the best that can happen is that even if I laid off, my next opportunity will be actually better than that, because I've been laid off twice, and every time the next opportunity was a lot better than the previous opportunities, right? So for me, like I find that works, sometimes for me, just putting my thoughts down on paper and just working through that acronym. Again, it's SWOCIB. Specify worst case scenario. What are the odds that would happen? How would I cope if that were to happen? How can I influence things so that my worst case scenario doesn't happen? And B, what's the best that can happen? Right?
Yeah. No, that's a great framework, because I think it just helps. It helps you stop from, I guess, going down that rabbit hole of anxiety, right? Of like, oh, all of these things, all of those. And for me, like, I guess I'm in a bit of unique situation where I've always operated as a consultant, as a contractor, right? And even as a solopreneur, of there isn't ever really solid stability. So things like networking, things like making sure you're keeping in touch with things and growing your brand, all of those areas, you have to always constantly do that, because my contract could end at any time, right? They don't have to provide me any severance for that type of work. Projects could end, and guess what? Contractors are usually the easiest to be cut.
Yeah.
Right. So I always am not necessarily on edge, but always prepared. And I think maybe the other piece you can look at along with the framework is, what are the opportunities if the worst case happen? Not just what do you need to do to cope with it, but what does it open yourself up to? Because I think, as you said, you found better jobs once you got laid off. For me, like when COVID all happened and stuff, that was probably my area where I had the most growth and self-development. So, what are the different opportunities that you can take if something were to go and happen? And even with those linkages of finding your next opportunity, I've always found a great link of the people that I work with and my next opportunity. And it could be, years down the road where they finally grow the fruit.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree. Greg mentioned a comment just spotlighting that. Greg says, be transparent, focus on why we are doing this, create space for team members to come as a PM, use that to build their skills, voice their concerns, model calmness for others. Yeah. I think a lot of times, whether we have formal authority or not, many people look to us PMs as leaders, right?
Right.
And I think that a lot of times you have to be the calm in the middle of the storm. Am I using that? Is that the right phrase? But you have to be calm when there's a lot of stuff going on around you.
Yeah. It reminds me of that old joke where there's a captain on a warship, right? and he says, "Oh, I don't want anyone to go and see me bleed." So that's why he wears his red shirt, right? So even if he gets shot, no one will know that he got shot, and that's also why he wears brown pants. But anyway, we'll keep going.
Nice. That's a LinkedIn type joke. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Awesome. No. That's what I like about you, Ben. You are authentic. All right. So Alan says, how do you foster collaboration in a project where silos dominate and stakeholders resist change due to fears around job security or discomfort with new ways of working? That's a good question. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the things that happens a lot when there's that layoff anxiety and trying to navigate that is a lot of people become protectionist. That they will start to go and gatekeep information. They'll start to go and gatekeep access because they inherently feel like that if I keep all of these things, then it will make me indispensable. If I'm the only person with this information, or I'm the only person with this power, they can't get rid of me, which isn't true. Right? They'll just say, well, we'll find some way to be able to go and access it and move it on. And so part of it is like any difficult stakeholder, it's engage with them, go and talk with them, help and understand a little bit more of the why that can help you navigate some of these things. And some of it they won't tell you because they'll be like, well, I'm doing this because I'm protecting my job. No one's really going to come out and tell you that, right? But I think if anything, we can hopefully have the conversation of, well, what can you give me? Right? How can maybe I can't get the waterfall of information, but maybe if I just turn the spigot a little bit, how do I get some drips of information to keep things moving? And also possibly, again, working to their advantage. How can I help you? Right? If we can show this team of collaboration and how we're able to go and perform, how does that help you possibly with your job security? And again, a lot of this is not outside of a lot of this is outside of our control. So we kind of we can't make false promises, obviously, right? But yeah, that's a few ways that I would say you could possibly handle that.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's on a case by case basis, but I 100% agree. It's like what's in it for them, like always finding that angle, and it's not always easy to find that. Because some people are very guarded. Some people will hate your guts no matter what. But there are ways to go about it and to do some sleuthing. And sometimes like you could get to a point where some people, like, no matter what you do, they're really out to get you because it's like a dog eat dog world out there, and they're out to get you. So I mean, you just have to sort of protect yourself, right? So it could be an environment where it's now like everybody's CYA. You just protect yourself, and I guess you still, without compromising your values, right?
Yeah, and if anything, that's where you document, right? That's going to be your receipts to be able to go and say, hey, we were trying to get this information, we weren't able to get it, we sent these emails, whatever it might be, right? To show that you're working forward on it, because that protectionist type of mentality comes up a lot inside of layoff areas, because that's when, hey, I'd love to look after the team, but I need to look after myself. And it becomes somewhat of a paradox, right? Because then other people, executives might say, hey, you're not a team player.
Yeah, for sure. Just one more question before we go. So Chukununso says, how do you protect yourself from layoffs? So I think, this ties back to what we talked about. It's I think the one thing that I really took from what Ben said is, building your brand, like just taking action, because you can't control everything, but what you can control, like double down on that. So build your brand, and that will help you internally and externally. All right. So moving on now. So we're gonna switch gears a bit, and we're gonna talk about titles. All right. So there was this article or piece that I saw in the Globe and Mail, whereby this person got a promotion. The person got increased scope and responsibilities, increased pay, but didn't get the next title. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, there's there's different aspects to look at it, right? So I'll look at it from the organizational or corporate perspective first, right? Is that usually a title change has to deal with the band range that their salary is within. And if you change the title, then they're automatically entitled to possibly a higher raise, right? So the reason why they may not necessarily change the title is because we want to keep you within the salary band within our organization, right? From an HR perspective, strictly speaking. But from a personal perspective of you and your advancement to the career, I would say the title change has a very important role, because it's not just for what you're doing right now, but also what are you building in for the future, right? And so it's something as simple as, somebody saying that you are a program manager versus a program assistant, right? How are people going to perceive that? Whether we like it or not, there's bias embedded inside of words that are put forward.
Yeah.
Right. And so if there is titles that are more, I'd say more prestigious, that you can go and present forward to not only to your internal people, but also to externals, if you're looking for other jobs, right? Those words will mean something, regardless of whether I know there's a lot of things of like, oh, titles don't matter, right? But to an extent, everything matters, right? And you have to be able to, one is understand what level of authority that looks like. You can go and describe it inside of there, but there's already things that are embedded into it, right? So for example, even the concept between a project manager versus a project leader. Now, in our minds, we're like, we all want to be the leaders and whatnot, right? But you look at what the title of a project lead versus a project manager, who's higher, who's lower, right? We already have a lot of that bias embedded inside of ourselves. Yeah. So if you're going to go and work up, I would say, see how you can go and change your title to align with the responsibilities that you're delivering. Even if you don't think the titles don't matter, when you're working within your organization, it may have influence as well, especially with stakeholders that you don't know. Otherwise, you have to work a lot harder to build influence rather than letting some of the authority, which already has influence built into it. Yeah. Right. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, and there's aspects on both sides.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I agree. And I think that when people say titles don't matter, I've also heard that, in my career. And a lot of times the people that say that are people with the nice titles, right? Right. After they've gotten all the titles, oh yeah, titles don't matter. But yeah, the title is not everything, but it actually helps, in terms, like you mentioned, wielding influence, or even like positioning you for the next opportunity, right? So because I help, people land jobs, that is also a negotiation lever that you can pull. Like, okay, you can't, raise me. We've tried everything else. All right, just give me that next title, or give me acting director. All those things make a difference. And the other thing that I would say is, sometimes in a company, you might not be able to get that next title or the title that you're looking for whatever reasons. Mm-hmm. But one thing that you can do is you can position yourself properly externally, like on LinkedIn or on your resume. Right. And I usually like to draw a distinction between your role and your title, right? So I'll give you an example. There was one time, I was actually leading projects, but they didn't have the title project manager in the company. Mm-hmm. Right. So just for the sake of, just fitting in, they gave me software support engineer. Like that was my title. Right. And if I had put that on my LinkedIn, I wouldn't be called for project manager roles. Right. So I put project manager because that was my role. Right. So I think that, sometimes we need to be able to differentiate between your role and your title, because at the end of the day, the title is what you have on your LinkedIn as your title is supposed to be a proxy for what you can do, right? So if I put software support engineer, like that would be misleading, and that would be unfair to me, right? And it's also going to be misleading to the recruiter. So I put, project manager there. And I think that another thing that you can do is, if you have, so not to dissemble, not to lie, but if you have a title that describes what you do, you put that there, and then in brackets you can put your official title. Like I've seen people do that.
Mhm.
So that's my take. What
Yeah, you definitely still want to be honest. You don't want to go and outright lie about these type of things, right? But I mean, if I'm a project management, fixer of projects, I'm not sure I want to go put onto my resume that I'm a corporate business janitor, right?
yeah. Well, nice. Awesome. Let me look at the comments. I think we have some comments coming up. Just give me a second. I'm just trying to get my focus. Hey, Bartholomew from England. Hey, Uche, double down on what you can control to stay relevant like that. All right, awesome. Now, let's move on to the next topic, which is AI interviews, AI job interviews. So, I don't know if some of you have been seeing this, but there are all these clips that have been going viral on TikTok where AI is supposed to be doing job screening, but then they end up glitching, right? So it's just
Yeah.
a very weird experience. So I don't know if this happens most of the time, but like this is going viral on LinkedIn. So what are your thoughts on AI job interviews? So basically, I think the way this is deployed is that normally your first screening round will be a call with somebody from HR or a video chat with somebody from HR. But now companies are now replacing that with AI, or maybe even having an AI screening before the human screening. So what are your thoughts on that, Ben?
All right, hot take here. Garbage. I think it's horrible because there's so much that you're going into conversation that you're trying to go and tell, you're trying to be able to go and convey to the other people of what your skills are, what your experience is, right? And so much of it I feel can be contextual, right? Like a lot of the banter that I have with organizations is very casual. And it may not come through necessarily in the recordings. It may not come through on a transcript, right? And part of it, I guess, as well, is I don't know what comes out on the back end to the HR. Like, what do they just get a transcript? Do they get a recording of all of these pieces and try and analyze them, right? But if you're hiring people and you're trying to understand how, because an interview is a conversation, in my opinion, right? It's not just like, hey, are they looking for me as an employee or a contractor, but also, am I going to fit with them? Am I going to fit within their organization? Because even if they put an offer on the table and I'm listening to the questions that they're asking, I may decide, you know what, this is not the organization for me. But AI can't convey a lot of those things. They may not necessarily have a lot of that information, or and even the whole glitching piece of it. I've seen a few of these clips where the AI starts repeating random words. The questions don't make a lot of sense anymore. And I'm like, how can you be objective about evaluating that person's interview now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you're putting people at a disadvantage of relying on a unreliable interviewer to be able to go and do that. So I would say, how are you interviewing your AI to know that they're interviewing properly?
Yeah. Okay. No, those are really good points. So can I take the contrarian view?
Yes,
so
let's debate.
Yeah,
let's debate. Let's do it.
All right. So, I just want us to have a robust conversation. So
Yes,
there are a few things now, like when it comes to scale. So HR departments are overwhelmed, right? I saw a role that opened up within 1 hour. There were 1,000 applications, right?
Right.
So AI departments are overwhelmed, and on the other side, job seekers are even using AI, which is even further just overwhelming AI departments. So that's one. The other thing is now speed, right? So with the volume of applications, they need to find a way of quickly assessing candidates that come through, right? And why not use technology? And with technology, you can comb through as many people as possible. Like a lot of people complain about ghosting. Well, would you rather not hear back from the company, or would you rather do an AI interview and at least get a shot, right? So that's the second point. And then the third is, I would say, just standardization, right? AI doesn't get hungry. AI doesn't get tired. You are going to come, they're going to judge you the same way like everybody else, right? Because sometimes you go into an interview and it's almost like this person doesn't want to be there. Like they're just reading through questions. I might as well just talk to an AI. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think those are definitely valid points, right? Because if anything, the economy is at a point where a lot of people are seeking jobs. Post comes out, a job posting comes out, so many people are applying. How are we going to get through this? And I guess this is where um, I would actually want to talk to like an HR person to be like, hey, give me the lowdown on what your struggles are and how does that process work? Because for me, it's always been frustrating of understanding, well, okay, you're ghosting things, but are there no other alternatives for you to be able to understand how to be able to send out a rejection or possibly to allow different paths, right?
Yeah.
And I guess interestingly enough, I actually don't interview a lot. For a lot of my contracts, a lot of the engagements that I do, they're all through just verbal conversations that I have with people, meeting with them online, talking with them in person, right? And at some point they'll be like, yeah, just send us your resume so we can have that in kind of the system and things like that. But I've never, I don't think I've really gone for a true formal interview in, I'll say like 6 or 7 years.
No,
So I might be a little bit out of touch on that, but at the same time, I'm also valuing what that human connection can bring,
yeah.
right?
Sorry, did you?
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah. No, so I like the points you mentioned, and I think maybe now we're going into solution in a bit, but I wanna just highlight that point you mentioned where it's like you haven't had to do an interview in a while, and to me, like, this is one of the best things that you can do for your brand. It's just for yourself. It's just build that brand, and there are people that don't apply, they don't like, they just put fillers out there and opportunities come to them, right? So I think one of the best things that you can, especially in this world of AI, where this broken hiring system, is just to build that brand, and let your credibility sort of precede you, or let your reputation precede you, right? So I really love that point that you mentioned. But now I want to just go back to a few points to look at things from the other perspective, right? So I think that, to your point earlier, how are we evaluating things? Like, what does good mean? Like, I sit in front of this AI. Like, how are you evaluating whether I did well or not? I think that the fact that that's not transparent, that concerns me.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when discrimination does happen, because even without AI, discrimination does happen. Who's responsible? Like, is it the software vendor? Is it the company? Like, I feel like now it's like, okay, there's this nebulous space, and it's easy for people to just pass the buck to the other person, right? So I think that needs to be clarified, right? Because otherwise, it could just open up a can of worms, I think. The other thing is, I'm not quite sure how, I guess this is going back, like, how is the AI trained? Like, what kind of training data? Are you observing 3 people that went through that were successful? Like, is that what you're training the AI on? And if you're doing that, are you just perpetuating bias? Like, okay, if Tom, Dick, and Harry came through, and they're like, all right, these are our golden candidates. So does that mean that the AI now is going to look for Tom, Dick, and Harry every time, right? So I think these are just some questions that come up for me. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It kind of brought up to my thought of like, are you then possibly biasing people that have an accent? Right. So if AI is reading your language, trying to go and read the sounds that are coming out of your mouth to be able to go and transcribe it, right? Are they picking up the words correctly? Because if they're not, all of a sudden you have become, the AI is biased in interpreting those words incorrectly, and maybe they're the wrong keywords inside of the AI algorithm to say, oh yeah, this is a possible candidate and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Because I just didn't pronounce a word properly.
Yeah,
right.
No, for sure.
And I think the whole piece around, what is the training behind it? What makes that person or that algorithm be able to trigger it and say, yeah, this is what I'm looking for? Because even if we go from industry to industry and different types of service levels and what your role is, all those type of things, like it's quite complex, right?
Yeah.
To be able to describe it and to say, how do I know that is the right match you're looking for? I don't know. It's all hidden behind the black box. And I don't know if there's other privacy and pieces that come into play when you're providing this information to the AI. Does it feed into more training of them? And have you agreed to that?
Yeah, right. That's such a good point. You don't know what you are signing up, when you click I agree, like what is all that data going to be used for, right? So that's really interesting. All right, so I see the chat's like blowing up. Let's highlight. Oh, okay, sorry, before I go to Bartholomew, I think Louis. Yeah, so Louis says AI might not provide the correct level of feedback that a person can during an interview, and the interview goes both ways. Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I've seen situations whereby people were expecting to speak to a human being,
right?
Then they go and they're so you can imagine the disappointment, and that now even impacts your interview performance. It's like,
yes,
like I dressed up, I prepped, and then I'm gonna speak to this AI bot, right? And then you can now end up even impacting your chances of moving through, right?
Oh man, I just had a horrible thought of like, what if you created your own AI to go and talk to their AI and interview for that, right?
Yeah, no, that would be, and let the AIs like outwit each other.
Yeah.
All right, and then let's see. Bartholomew says, should sector-specific experience still be a hiring requirement for PMs, or is that just outdated gatekeeping? Okay, it seems to be a pain. All right, so maybe we can come back to this question. I just want to just wrap up the AI topic and then we can come back to that. Okay, so I see Greg is responding to Bartholomew. All right, so nice. Bartholomew and Greg are having a conversation in the chat, which is great. Awesome. Please, you don't need to wait for us. You can have your conversation. All right, so let's move on to the next topic, which is Gen Zs are becoming NEET by choice. Right. So for those of you that don't know what NEET means, so NEET is NEET, and it means not in employment, education, or training. Right. So they're not. According to this article, this is an article in Fortune. Basically, Gen Zs are becoming NEET by choice, so not interested in education, employment, or training. All right. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts, Ben? And sorry, before that, Gen Zs, by the way, so let's define who Gen Zs are. So Gen Zs they were born between 1997 and 2012, so they are between 13 to 28 years old. So what are your thoughts there, Ben?
I think it's an interesting dynamic. And if anything, it speaks larger about like, where is our society going? What are we doing? Where is our head at, right? And how do we want to go and remedy it? And I guess just by saying NEET, and maybe I need a little bit of level set on what that exactly means when they're saying not in employment, education, or training. Does that mean they're not interested in going into those areas, or they're not interested in getting employed or teaching or training others? I just want to make sure I clarify that.
No, that's a good point. So basically, I mean, I also just found out about NEET not too long ago when I was reading about this. So basically, so I'm a millennial. I'm just gonna put that out there. But I heard the same thing about us back in the day.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, all right, many of us when we don't really see the point of school. Many of us want to be YouTube influencers. So basically, it's like not interested in employment, education, or training. Like many of them are actually choosing to just stay at home, or maybe they're not buying into this whole idea of the rat race, the hustle culture, and all that. So I think this is a bit of a it's a sweeping statement, and maybe it was even the article was titled this way to spark controversy, right? Because we're really speaking in very broad strokes right here. We're talking about an entire generation, but basically, it seems like evidence seems to point that Gen Z, compared to previous generations, are increasingly becoming not interested in employment, like working typical 9 to 5, education, going to be college educated, or training, like some sort of, I guess, maybe apprenticeship, right?
Right.
So, what's that?
Right. I think part of it then, okay, let me clarify my answer then, is that a lot of the jobs we're seeing now are not positions that we've ever seen before, even in the past 5 years, past 10 years, right? I look at the previous generation, let's say the baby boomers coming out, and it was very normal and expected that people would be in their jobs for 20, 30 years, right? They retire, whatever. And now, it's kind of like there's so many different, I'd say, mini economies that are arising, right? You've got the gig economy, you've got things around social media, you have so many different opportunities presented because there's different technologies now being available, as well as also different market demands from consumers, right? Like, oh, we consume this content and we would pay for it. Whereas normally, even from a TV perspective, you used to have free television. You just bought a television, you got some rabbit ears or antenna or something like that, and you would get free channels. You never had to go and pay for it because advertisements would pay for it, right? Now, that's continued in some of the other places, but now you're subscribing to streams. There's not TV channels that you subscribe to anymore. They're different streaming platforms. So there's so much, I think, radical change around what can get you experience. And so even like a YouTube streamer or whatnot, you're already picking up business skills of incoming money. What are my expenses for buying equipment or for software platforms that you need to go and help support yourself? And so in looking at that, I just think there's a lot more diversity in what you can go and do. Like I would say, even what you and I are doing as entrepreneurs, right? Me as a leadership coach and you as a career coach for project managers, right? These are not things that have been really prevalent even, 5 years ago. So I don't know, maybe I fit into this neat group as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, till this day, I think that my dad thinks I don't have a serious job.
Oh, I know. My dad's like that too. He's like, the thought of me being a consultant or a contractor, and even from a fractional perspective, he's like, so you don't have a job, do you? I'm like, well,
yeah, I know.
Not in the conventional sense, I suppose, right?
Yeah. No, because my other siblings, like my brother is a software engineer. My sister is a doctor, right? So it's like all these other people, they have jobs, or it's almost like, okay, are you still doing your personal projects? So I'm like, yeah. And whenever I get like some of these things, like, like accolades, I try to send it over. But I think, he still thinks I'm just doing like side projects. And
yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, I'm jumping onto a podcast with Ben. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, call me when you have a real job. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that that's very. Those are some really good points that you raised, right? Because I also wanted to talk about a few things. So I think, just give me a second. Let me collect my thoughts. So yes, wages right now haven't kept up with inflation, right? So that's one. Even I remember, as millennials, even back in the day, a lot of people were saying that we are actually going to be worse off than the previous generations. It seems like it's even worse now for Gen Zs, right? Mm-hmm. So the economy is more precarious. Wages haven't kept up with inflation, and cost of living is rising. So I think you can't blame people for just feeling like, okay, this system is broken, and I'm not just gonna go into a 9-to-5 where I know that I might be laid off very soon. And yeah, so it's like something needs to change, right? And then on top of that, statistics show that, mental health challenges are quite, serious. I read somewhere that Gen Zs are twice as stressed as we were. I say we, I'm a millennial. I don't know if you're a millennial, Ben, but as I was, when I was, back in the day, right? So yeah. Mental health challenges are rising. So I think when you put all of this together, like, it's more difficult to buy a house. I think if you put all of this together, like, I would be pretty, I think I wouldn't trust the system, right? And I would, go look for alternative means. And I think that this leads me to another point where it's like, like I don't know that somebody needs to go through a 4-year college education to become a PM. Like, I think that if you give me a high school graduate, if you give me a high school graduate, give me 2 years or 3 years with that person, and I can train that person to become a senior program manager, right? I don't think you need to go through college, stumble into a career, and then become an accidental program or project manager. I think that, we can bypass all of that, and there can be a high school to project management pipeline and just bypass all of that. But I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, but I feel like we don't need all that detour.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you and I should start PM University, 2-year degree. No, but I think so. Those are really interesting points, and I agree that there is a ton of different more instability, and the system is not the same as it was. Right, even the job security, where you could say I'm going to stay in a job for 20, 30 years. Now it's like, hey, you might only be at a job at 1 year, and it's not your choice that you're staying. Right? The company can just say, well, we're going to cut everyone and you're back into the same position. So what am I relying on? Right. And even with organizations of how they view sometimes the project management of like, you're so good at doing it, why don't you manage a project of the stuff that you do? And the skill sets are not the same. Right. You can look it up around the Peter principle of like people rising to the level of their incompetence, right? That's how you get bad managers. That's how you get a lot of problems introduced into the organization, because there's a bias that because you're good at something, all of a sudden you're good at managing people to do those same type of tasks, right? And so if anything, I feel like there's some core areas that are really missing in a lot of education systems right now, even at a younger age, right? Things around having financial literacy, right? Project management, critical thinking, right? Not just the math technical pieces. Those are like, if you need a degree to be able to navigate those areas because you're working inside of an engineering medical field or things like that where you need that information, by all means, I'm saying like go for it, right? But some of those basic skills where we're trying to go and help kids build their grit, their planning, their thought processes, right? How are we actually nurturing those things so that they can be more resilient? Because they come out into, I got 2 kids in school coming out, and it feels to an extent like everyone gets that participation award. There's not as much grind, whereas I'm kind of like, oh man, I only got 60% on this exam, I better go and study. Instead, it's like, everyone did kind of okay, but these people did a little bit more better okay, right? What does that exactly mean? And it's not trying to go and create stress around you have to be perfect, but how do we build that resilience? How do we build that grit at a younger age, as well as understanding of how the real life world things impact you, of finances, of execution, of mindset, all of those areas.
Yeah.
So I'm off on my soapbox now.
Yeah. No. And I think that's a very important point that you raised, because if the economy is getting more precarious, more volatile, then they even need more grit, right? So, we should actually, help people, train them, and like help them develop that skill, right? That's such a good point. I feel like we can keep on talking about that, but maybe we can switch gears a bit, and this will be the last topic for the day. Sesame Street.
Yeah,
Sesame Street is coming to Netflix. Did you see that?
I did.
Did you watch Sesame Street when you were young?
I did, with a count and everything. Whoa, It was awesome.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at kind of some of the other economical factors on it, right? So NPR, they're getting their funding pulled, right? PBS, all those type of areas for public broadcasting. And if there's ways to be able to go and, I guess, support good educational areas, and they're looking for ways to be able to go and fund it, I would say, yeah, by all means, go and do that. The only issues I would say is, are there things where there might be conflict of interest, where it's like, hey kids, now that you're watching Sesame Street, here's some other Netflix shows that you can go and watch, right? Like it can always kind of, that corporate side can always somewhat, I'll say, come into that arena. I'm hoping they still stay true to what Sesame Street was trying to go and achieve and their intent around it. But I would say if they can keep broadcasting some things that are quality content, then by all means, find it where you can.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I first of all, I didn't even know that Sesame Street was still going on, because my kids don't watch that. So
Yeah.
it would be pretty interesting. We have Netflix, so I would like to see how the show has changed since when I used to watch it back in the day.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So we've reached the end of today's show. I'm just looking to see if there are any last minute questions. But thank you all so much for participating. This was fun. Ben, any last minute things that you wanna share? Anything you want to share before we?
No, just any of you viewers, if you want to go and connect with me, go and find me on LinkedIn under PM Coach Ben. I love being able to go and have conversations, and I think Mukhtar will say I put out some interesting type of content that's a little bit different than everyone else, trying to make it a little bit more fun and engaging for project management anyways, and at least giving you maybe some food for thought. So feel free to go and connect with me, type in a quick message for me, and I'm happy to go and connect.
Yeah, no, I really love Ben's authenticity and yeah, I think we've known each other for a couple of years on LinkedIn, right? And
Yeah.
one thing that I would always count on, or even look forward to, Ben, is the humor that you would bring. Yeah, because LinkedIn can be serious. Even at work, there's a lot of stress, but it's always nice, to have a laugh every now and then. So really appreciate that, Ben.
No, thanks for having me on, Mukhtar.
Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. All right. Take care.